fictionforadults.com.
Chapter 2. Cam strode past the women to head off his stepbrother and drag him back to the cabin they'd rented. Otherwise, Jags would introduce himself, shake their hand, and read their future. Attempting to fill in the gaps of his vision, he'd ask a shitload of questions, making this one hell of a long night. "I was coming to," Jags laughed, eyeing Cam's soaked clothing. "You could have borrowed my suit." He peered around Cam. "Who are your friends?" "Don't know 'em." Cam grasped Jag's elbow and tugged him in the opposite direction. "Let's go." "Tilly!" Jags twisted out of Cam's grasp, danced around him, and sprinted toward the blonde. When he reached her, he scooped and twirled her. She let out a clipped laugh.
"Hello, Jags."
"So good to see you." He lowered her to her feet. "Where's your husband?"
"Nate's not here. I'm with Maggie."
Jags turned toward the sexy redhead still sitting at the table. With a shit-eating grin, he strode toward her. "What's a sweet thing like you doing with a gun? Cam has the same model. Gen 4? She looked at Cam, and he shook his head. "Where's my manners? Nice to meet you." Jags cupped her hand in both of his. Cam clasped his hands behind his head and broke into a brisk pace. The little shit was, no doubt, reading her future. Fuck. Jags stumbled. His arms swiped through the air as if blind. He tripped and fell into the table. Regaining his balance, he felt his way along the worn wood and sat beside Maggie. With his head back and his fists balled by his side, he released a guttural scream. "Ah!" Maggie hugged herself and stepped away from the table.
"What's wrong with him?"
Cam rushed to Jags. He gripped his upper arms and gently shook him. "Why do you do this to yourself?" Jags brushed past Cam. With careful steps, as if approaching a skittish animal, he neared Maggie and cupped her chin. "So much pain." A twinge of possessiveness sparked Cam's temper. His face flushed. His hands trembled. A flash of heat swept through his body. Sweat dripped down his forehead. Cam shifted his weight and shook his head. She was just some random girl. What the fuck? "He won't give you the end that you seek," Jags said. She shuddered. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "My brother has been alone too long. You don't know how happy I am to meet you." Tilly tapped Jags on the shoulder.
"He's your brother?"
Keeping his eyes on Maggie, Jags said, "Yes."
"I must have seen him at Chase then, visiting you. I thought I recognized him."
Tilly grimaced.
"Didn't you have a vision of what your brother just had to do?"
"I rarely subject myself to Cam's chi. Too painful." Cam rolled his eyes, and there it was, the freaky voodoo crap. Jags glanced to each of them. "You're all soaked, and I don't think it's because you went swimming, since Cam is dressed and so is Tilly. I'm guessing there's an intriguing story to tell." Jags turned toward Tilly, a mischievous smile on his face. "So the question is, what did my brother just try to do?" Cam glared at her. "Don't."
"Hold it,"
Maggie said.
"Am I missing something?" "He tried to kill himself."
Tilly pointed.
"With that gun."
Jags's head whipped around. The moment their eyes locked, the color of Jags's eyes shifted to silver. His brows lowered and the goofy smile on his face turned down.
"Bastard!"
He stormed toward Cam, finger wagging like a father scolding a toddler. "I'm not gonna let you kill yourself, and I'm prepared to haunt you night and day to stop you." "Really?" Cam said. "Shocker." Jags gave Cam a dismissive wave, took the gun from Maggie and bowed. "Ladies, I bid you farewell." Cam walked. Jags followed. Yup, one hell of a long night. Cam whipped the screen door open and stormed into the cabin. Planting his palms on the far wall, he hung his head between his arms. Jags's boots clicked on the wood-planked floors. With the thud of each step, Cam's rage soared and the familiar symptoms surfaced. His hands shook. Beads of sweat speckled his neck and forehead. A white light pierced his vision. A monster migraine slammed behind his eyes. "No psychobabble bullshit," Cam said. "Not tonight." Silence. Cam glanced over his shoulder. Jags stood in the center of the room. No smile, no scowl. Jags without a hint of his usual animation and goofiness. Traits Cam found comical and sometimes maddening. Jags stepped forward. His leg whipped out and swiped Cam's feet from beneath him. He landed on his ass. What the hell? With a booted foot, Jags stomped onto his chest. He stared in disbelief. They'd fought many times, but this was different. Their fights usually consisted of punches and kicks. Nobody was ever hurt, and by the end, they both laughed. And not once had Jag used his martial arts training against him. Cam grunted as he tried to catch his breath. "I thought you hated violence." "The few times I've been forced into violence were because of you." He removed his boot from Cam's chest. "Sometimes I really hate you." Cam climbed to his feet. He slammed Jags against the wall and gripped him around the neck. Saliva sprayed from his clenched teeth. "Don't fuck with me." A steel fist rammed into Cam's gut. He stumbled backwards. "Shit, I'd hate to think..." He clutched his stomach, gasping. When Jags walked toward him, Cam held up his hands, palms out. "How you'd be if you loved violence." Jags backed Cam against the wall. "Start talking." Talk. Not Cam's favorite pastime. He slugged Jags across the jaw, a move he could have easily blocked but for some reason chose not to. Stepping backwards, Jags glided a finger over his cut lip. He slid a pack of gum from his pants pocket and leaned his back against the parallel wall. "I'm listening." Cam bent at the waist and braced his hands on his thighs. "Tony didn't drown. I held the fucker's head under the water until I was sure he was dead. And I'd do it again." "You probably saved AJ's life from your father." "For too long. I didn't protect my little brother from that bastard." "How pathetic is that?" "Pathetic is not a word I would ever use to describe you." The silver in Jags's eyes shimmered, which meant more voodoo freaky shit was coming. The last time Jags attempted to see him, Jags fell into a week-long coma. Cam's stepbrother was extremely sensitive to what Jags called the dark side of a person's psyche. Determined to keep Jags out of his psyche, aura, chi, whatever the fuck Jags called it, Cam looked at the ceiling. "Last week I got rear-ended in the expedition. Turns out it was some old geezer. Couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds. Cam covered his mouth with his fist. I knocked on his window, but before I could say a word, the old man burst into tears. Jags cocked his head, a clear expression of boredom. "Get to the part where you decide death is the only option for you." "He pissed himself." "Well, you're huge. I probably would have pissed myself too if I didn't know you better, and your fuck-off expression doesn't help either. I know you're out of practice, but try a smile every once in a while." Cam pushed off the wall and paced. "The same demon that made Tony hurt AJ is in me. I've felt it all my 33 years. I've held it back.
Cam faced Jags.
I'm tired of fighting it. And if I stop fighting it, I'll end up hurting somebody. Somebody who doesn't deserve it. Somebody like that old geezer who fender-bendered the expedition.
He resumed pacing.
Gramps needs me, and I'd hate to leave him, but I won't become Tony. I'd rather blow my own fucking head off before I let that happen.
Cam leaned against the wall, propped a foot behind, and crossed his arms over his chest. We may not be blood, Jags said, but you are my brother, and I know you would never hurt anyone. I don't need my visions to tell me that.
That doesn't mean...
Jags cleared his throat. Adrian cheated on AJ. I never read her aura. I just sensed she was a conniving little witch, and I was right. Some people's auras are so wicked, I don't need to be touching them to see the black of their soul.
You know that kind of talk freaks me out.
Right now, I don't give a shit. I was right about the waitress at Stoney's that had a crush on you. I steered her clear. I was right about...
Get to the point.
I see people for what they are. I've never been wrong. And you, he pointed, my friend, are not evil.
If you see, Cam made air quotes, people so well, how come you nearly fainted when I told you your girlfriend asked me to fuck her in the backseat of your truck?
Jags dropped his gaze to the floor. He whispered, hitting below the belt, buddy.
I'd call her a cunt, but she lacks the depth and warmth.
Jags looked up and narrowed eyes at him. We're getting off topic. My point is that if you were a monster, like Tony, I would have sensed it. You think I could be around you if your soul was colored with the same kind of evil that painted Tony's? Cam tapped the back of his head against the wall.
You just don't get it.
What I get is you need a solid fucking. Cam groaned.
We're not going there.
5 years ago, Cam had walked in on his girlfriend fucking a bald-headed punk, and he beat the guy until the police pulled him off. Worth every one of the 176 days he served in Huntsville State Prison, but not an experience he cared to repeat. To keep others safe, Cam vowed a life of celibacy and solitude. He had no friends. The only people he gave a damn about was his family. Jag said, "Did you know that societies where premarital sex is discouraged have more crime and incidents of violence?" Clasping his hands behind his head, Cam traipsed back and forth, his boots thudding on the floor.
Shut the fuck up.
Did it ever occur to you that your aggression worsened when you decided to keep your pecker to yourself? Need more reasons to keep your head on your shoulders? Jags counted on his fingers. I'll give you a few. Gramps, Dad, AJ, and yours truly. In front of his mouth, Jags steepled his fingers. I'll admit that you have a great pain hiding in your psyche.
Enough with the psychobabble bullshit. I killed my own father, and I don't have an ounce of regret.
Jags hung his head and snickered. If you had no regret, I would see black in your soul. He pierced Cam with that familiar, all-knowing, cocky look. Give me a year. If you're still convinced you're a menace, I'll shoot you myself. Cam gave him a sidelong look.
You expect me to believe that load of horse shit?
The details of the plan. Jags counted on his fingers. First, you're going to get laid as soon as possible. Second, you're going to get off your ass and make the repairs needed on the old Copper Creek place and turn it into the best restaurant this side of Houston. You need a life other than taking care of Gramps.
I won't leave him alone.
Lest I remind you that less than an hour ago, you were prepared to shoot your brains out, thus leaving him very alone. Cam shook his head.
I cannot hammer nails into a wall, stock glassware, and plan a dinner menu if I'm constantly worried about Gramps.
Gramps won't be alone.
Looking at his counting fingers, Jag said, "Leave that to me. I don't like the sound of that." With 3 large and graceful strides, Jags crossed the room and set his hand on Cam's shoulder. Heat warmed the muscles in Cam's neck and arms. His legs weakened. An invigorating chill ran through him, like taking a deep breath after sucking on a peppermint, except his whole body felt electrified, not just his mouth. Cam collapsed onto his ass. "How the hell do you do that?" Jags crouched and bounced on his haunches. "It might have something to do with all the pussy I get. It doesn't leave room for aggression, only peace. A peace I am more happy to transfer to you." Jags offered his hand. "Do we have a deal?" The deep blue returned to Jag's eyes. His stepbrother was back to himself, minus the freaky shit. Cam grimaced. "I don't know how to live. I'm going to teach you." "I don't like the sound of that." 1 year. Cam sighed. "Please." Jags nodded at his own outstretched hand. Jags didn't wear his emotions on his sleeve. He showcased them in neon flashing lights. His unearthly compassion might as well have been stamped on his forehead. He wasn't an open book, more like a 3D IMAX blockbuster. Jags waggled his fingers, urging Cam to accept his hand. His eyes glimmered with moisture. 1 year. Cam laced his fingers behind his neck. "I don't want to hurt you. Hearing you nearly blew your head off blew a cannon through the center of my chest. It was kind of painful. Now stitch me up. Accept my hand and give me 1 fucking year." Tilting his head, he flashed a wide smile, teeth clenched, like a child forced to smile for school pictures. Cam shook Jags' hand and clapped him on the shoulder. "Brothers." Jags curled his fingers around Cam's forearm. "Always."
Hey guys, check us out on fictionforadults.com. Thanks.